My lords, I thank all the noble lords who contributed to this debate and all of their expressions of support for these amendments, even perhaps in intent at least from the noble lord the minister, and I thank him for his detailed answer. Now, my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulsecoomb asks, what is the government for? Surely one of the purposes is to ensure we have clean air to breathe, ensure we have a healthy life for future generations, as something, of course, the noble Lord Bird is trying to do by other means. The noble Earl, the Earl of Dundee, offered very welcome support and said very clearly that what we need is goals to be identified and made concrete, acknowledging that we have to consider the global impact of our environment. The noble Lord Lee of Crondall said that we can't just go on generating greenhouse gases. How could it be better summed up? Particularly highlighting our position of COP chair, and stressed the need for a statistical compatibility and credibility in Glasgow. And I think perhaps we might just park the emperor with no clothes metaphor, but it's certainly apt. Now, the noble Lady Baroness Parmenter stressed the need for the Treasury to engage in this debate, which I can only very much agree, and also spoke about the need for all departments to be engaged in environmental issues, with which, of course, I agree. But this amendment, my amendment, is certainly very focused on the narrow issue of economic measurement, moving away from the failed damaging emphasis on GDP. Now, the noble Lady Baroness Jones of Whitchurch focused on reprogramming the economy, something we clearly need to do. And she said this needs a rethink at the highest level. I was thinking as the noble lady was speaking of perhaps, the highest level in the government should be DEFRA. That's the place where it all starts. And she also stressed the need for leadership from the top. And I have to particularly welcome the comments of the noble lord, the minister, many of which reflect speeches that I give regularly about the total misalignment of using GDP as a welfare measure. I just wish we could hear this from the noble Lord Ladagu or in the other place, Rishi Sunak, instead of only from the noble Lord. Now, the noble Lord, the minister, referred to the Gas Gupta report, and that, of course, is a very useful and important report. At least in using pound values, it puts the whole issues into terms that the Treasury can understand. But I do want to tackle a suggestion made by the noble Lord the Minister that suggests the alternatives are overly complicated. I did actually in my speech set out a suggested measure presented by a group of distinguished economists working with the OECD, and I'd be happy to share that paper with the Minister. And of course, as I referred to at the start, the New Zealand Treasury has managed to master all of these mathematical and statistical challenges. You might say that New Zealand is a smaller country than the UK, but I think if their Treasury can manage it, perhaps ours should be able to too. And just reflecting on my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulsecomb's amendment, the noble Lord the Minister said that this bill sets out ambitious, legally binding air quality targets. Well, that's, of course, like the ones that we have had under EU membership for decades, the ones that we've been breaking regularly, that we've seen Client Earth taking the government to court over again and again successfully. This is not all under control, and I welcome the comments from the noble Lord the Minister that this is something we need to cooperate with our neighbours on, something I'd also like to see much more broadly reflected across government. So I think this has been a very useful debate. Perhaps we've taken things a little way forward, particularly in the noble Lord the Minister's comments. I think we'll probably be back at report in somewhere in this ground, but in the meantime, I beg leave to withdraw this amendment.